There is nothing quite like the excitement of game day, and today's episode is all about the art of tailgating. This is all about tradition, creating memories with friends and family, and embracing the heart of fall. From the smell of the barbecue grilling to the cheerful clink of glasses raised in toasts, the spirit of the game day is something many of us hold dear, and who better to guide us through the ultimate game day gathering than today's guest, Vera Stewart. Vera has spent decades mastering the art of hospitality, and she is known far and wide for bringing tradition to life through unforgettable celebrations and mouth-watering Southern cuisine. As the longtime host of the VeryVera Show, she's inspired countless people to bring more warmth and charm into their homes and lives. Her work has been featured in outlets like Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and her cookbooks are a treasure trove of recipes that connect us to family and the past. And if she wasn't busy enough, she's starting work on a third. All that to say, I'm very grateful to Vera for taking the time out of her busy schedule to chat, so let's dive into a conversation full of tradition, team spirit, and plenty of good eats with the one and only Vera Stewart. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. Vera, I'm so excited to be chatting today. This is going to be, I think, a really fun conversation. I probably should have thought better about scheduling our conversation during lunchtime because I think my stomach's going to be grumbling in the background.
Needless to say, I'm thrilled to have been asked to do this. The name of your podcast just really speaks to me. Grandma is certainly a very emphatic name to me, not only as a grandmother myself, but having been named for my grandmother, whose nickname was Very Vera. And when I decided to do this business of mine, I thought, what could be better than a name like Very Vera? If you're having a bad day and the name of your business is Very Vera, you have really good reason to get up and be excited about what you do. And certainly I am. I never dreamed, Allie, that I would get to the 40-year anniversary of my company. I really didn't have a defined business plan when I started this. I was a home economics teacher right out of the University of Georgia, and home economics was not a class that I took in high school because if you were on the path to go to college, you couldn't take that elective. But I was fortunate enough my senior year for my home room to be the home ec department. And I became fast friends with the home ec teacher and found myself actually getting to school early so I could help her set up the little vignette. So she truly was a mentor to me and encouraged me to go to Georgia and major in home ec. And now, fast forward all these years later, the diversification from that degree has gone full circle. I've never left the path. I've never thought about doing anything other than this. And to have been able to be a caterer, a mail order company, a syndicated television show, a cookbook author, all of which are married. They're all intertwined. I'm very fortunate. I'm very excited still at the age of 71 for my next step, my next venture. So hopefully I'll be able to give your audience some good tips today.
Well, I sure think you will because we have all sorts of fun things to talk about and pull from. I do want to ask, Georgia, were you already in Georgia? Is that where you're from? And then you went to the University of Georgia, or did you end
Yes,
up
I
there
grew
because of
up in the
school?
center of the state, Macon, Georgia. I laugh about it now because my children went to Georgia and the requirements to get in Georgia have gone up by leaps and bounds. Many people don't get accepted. When I went, you just got in your car and drove up there. So I've been continued to be very involved with the University of Georgia Family and Consumer Science Department. I've just enjoyed the opportunity to do more things statewide with a degree from Georgia and that sort of thing.
Now, we're talking about game day, so I have to ask. I will assume you're a Georgia fan.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, my husband went to Georgia, my mother went to Georgia, my children went to Georgia. So we're
Wow.
very much Georgia fans.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tailgating because that is a big central part of today's conversation. What do you think makes tailgating so fun, sexy, exciting, tradition-based?
Oh, it has just grown by leaps and bounds. I have to refer back to my own roots in terms of, going to a Georgia game first happened for me as a student. I didn't go with my family when I was young, which many, but both of my children take their children to the game, their younger children. But there really wasn't much of that, going on. And there are other universities in the SEC conference where they are noted for their tailgate experience. Right off the bat, I think about Ole Miss
Hmm.
and that it is just an experience worth. In fact, I need to do a show from there. I just think it would be amazing. But tailgating has become, honestly, for some people that are not truly diehard sports fans, that's the event. That's why they've traveled to wherever the game is going to happen. The things that they take, the grills, the tents, the different activities, the music, all kinds of things. The food is a big part of it, but just the experience of setting it up. Many people that have trouble getting tickets to a game now, because that's become, a very important part of it too, is can you actually get tickets? They just make the experience the tailgate, and they'll have a TV set up run by a generator. And, they really do try to make it an experience. And certainly the food is a big part of that.
Well, I love that you are using the word experience. That was always, I mean, when I was planning events, I was always coming back to experience, right?
Yes.
And that is such a key word. So I think one of the things I wanted to ask was if we were to strip this all back and kind of start at the very beginning, what do you think are the bare bones elements during a tailgating experience, whether it's tailgating at a game or even if we're talking about hosting folks at home? What do you think are the key elements that people should be thinking about when we're talking about crafting that overarching experience?
To me, as an event planner and as a caterer for many years,
Hmm.
um, I run into this a good bit with clients that I work with to be prepared for the Masters Golf Tournament. And a lot of times, what you want to do cannot be created in the environment, where you are. So, and certainly this speaks to your experience as an event planner. You've got to be realistic in what can you do in your space. So certainly, if you're in the parking lot of a building on a campus somewhere, do you have power? Are you taking a generator? Are you going to haul a grill that has a lot of things that has to be done to it in order to fire it up? What do you have access to? What would you do if it rained? What's plan B if you've planned your whole event around cooking on the grill and then you can't do that? So I always like to have the plan A and the plan B. But in today's world, things like making sure that cold things are kept cold, that hot things are served hot, that what you can provide, whether it's a seat for everybody or a lap tray, or whether everything needs to be finger food, those sorts of things, need to be thought through. Many people in our area now actually do it in their own backyard. You've got the big outside television. You can have friends over. Then I love any sort of a theme. So if it's Georgia, of course, and it's red and black, I'm going to have that woven in to whatever I'm doing. But there's always that surprise element. You want to think of something that maybe somebody wasn't expecting, whether it's the halftime, something that you pull out that's the wow factor, or you end with a great dessert, hoping that you're in celebration and that your team actually won and you didn't lose the game. You never know how that's going to pan out. With anything, if anybody in the audience has ever planned a children's birthday party. A lot of what I've just described has got to be interfaced into that decision making. And then next thing you know, you've turned into the children's birthday party expert. So then you're getting all the calls from people. How did you do this? Where did you find that? I just love the presentation part of any experience. I just try to go all out in what it's going to actually look like because many times people don't even really eat that much.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that they want to eat everything we're serving, but you really truly never know.
It's true. You know what's funny is now I'm north, so I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs. So in my area, it's all about the NFL. And so we're big in our household, we're Eagles fans. And it's funny, my husband is such a diehard fan. I mean, he will be nervous all day that he feels like he can't eat. But then if things are going okay, he'll grab a bowl of chili,
Mhm.
But it is funny because I mean, I'll eat anytime. But he's like, oh, I can't eat yet. And it is funny depending on your situation. And you mentioned presentation. I think too, if you're hosting, and perhaps this just comes from folks who value hospitality. I mean, for me, food is love. That's how I love on my people, but it's also in the presentation. I think
Mhm.
when you put that energy in, people can feel that from you. So
Mhm.
I love that.
Well, and I mean, something as simple as between the hedges at the University of Georgia, is shrubbery. It's boxwood, and you can now buy it that's silk or artificial, and you can literally make your table look like the hedge.
I love it.
It's like you're walking up to the hedge that's right on the other side of the actual football field. And so that's something that I feel like is easy to accomplish, to have some sort of landscape that matches up with what you're doing and where you are. The different vessels that food can be served in or on, depending on where, like I mentioned, Ole Miss and the tailgate there. I mean, people bring silver candelabras. I mean, they've got their grandmother's silver tray sitting there with sandwiches on it. It's all about that over the top experience. But things like if it's a night game, giving consideration to different lighting opportunities. And today you can get those little tabletop lamps that
Yes,
you can
yes.
order on Amazon, and you can create this amazing looking area for the food to be served that's under lamplight, which I can remember bringing extension cords to wedding receptions so that I had that lamp look on some of my tables.
Yeah.
It was really hard to pull off back then, but now it's very easy.
You brought up a really good point, which is that location matters, as does time of day. Food is the central part
Hmm.
of this conversation. So, could we talk a little bit about what that tailgating experience and menu might look like and how it might vary depending on, you might have 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock tailgate versus, an evening game. So we're looking at dinner or that Sunday afternoon or
Right,
the
right.
Saturday games, if it's college. So could we talk a little bit about some of those
Oh,
crowd pleasers and menus that you love, depending on all of those variables?
absolutely. The earliest a college game is going to be on the Eastern Standard Time is generally going to be 12:30. But you're right, people have gotten to the location at 8:30 in the morning. So, then that introduces a breakfast sandwich situation, which can really be a lot of fun. And there's so many grills right now that are like griddles that
Yes,
you could actually have the opportunity easily to put those sandwiches together on site, where you're frying the egg or you're scrambling the egg or cooking the bacon, right there. And in terms of experience, I mean, my mother-in-law told me when I first got married, she said, you don't have any dinner planned, just put a piece of bacon in a frying pan. So when he walks in, he gets that smell. And I promise you that works. Just the smell of bacon cooking would invite people to, let's go ahead and go through the buffet. But, that sort of thing for for a morning tailgate, whether it's mimosas or Bloody Marys. And, maybe from a presentation standpoint, really think about what your garnish is going to be because you could do that the night before. I mean, if you're going to serve Bloody Marys, you could like skewer an olive, a pickle, a shrimp, a piece of lemon, and have all of these little skewers already done and in your cooler on ice. And then when you pour it into the plastic cup, the wow factor is the skewer that you were provided. Could even have a, representation of your team in there somewhere as well. So the drink might make a difference. But I do think in terms of cost and providing plenty of food for everybody to feel like they ate,
Mhm.
needless to say, breakfast is going to be that meal where you're not having to break the bank to serve. The next opportunity is probably going to be like a 3 o'clock, 3:30, and that's kind of middle of the day. But again, the tailgate's going to happen right at noon. So the tailgate's happening, during the lunchtime. I've always felt like those long sub sandwiches that could go the length of the football field. Again, this is, taking the 8 foot or the 6 foot folding table and getting your young person involved and making it look like a football field, and then have this sandwich that's just going from one field goal to the other that, you can cut. In our area, homemade potato chips have become all the rage. And so
Okay.
whether you're cooking them yourself or you're buying all of these boutique potato chip businesses that have just gone crazy in our area in South Carolina and Georgia, that to me is the fun, which used to be the stuffed potato bar, where you would get your baked potato and then you had all the different condiments and you can
Yeah.
keep the potatoes, hot in a cooler. I'd rather do the sandwich and have all of these different potato chips,
Oh, that's so
different
fun.
flavors, different looks. That becomes the fun moment. But then the next one, of course, is the 7:30 game. And so now you're getting into the cocktail hour. Although I hate to have to say that I think the cocktail hour for college football starts at 8:30 in the morning. But the evening games really do have you probably won't eat again, kind of like your husband.
Yeah.
You'll eat before the game starts, and then you're not going to be hungry for the rest of the time. But this is where people like to do the hamburgers and the hot dogs, live with the grill or the griddle. The sides, can get tricky because you immediately think potato salad, coleslaw, things like that. But unless you've got some sort of a vessel that you can line with one of those hard or soft gel frozen packs, you just can't leave that sitting out. And that's not hard to do. You can camouflage it with cabbage leaves to make it look good. But if you just think you're going to be okay with ice that's in the bag and the cooler anyway, I mean, it's just going to melt just like that. So having something that you can insulate, with a regular cooler out of your freezer would be great. I also like to suggest that if you do this a lot, that you have a cooler, just a regular cooler that you put in the back of the car that you designate as your hot cooler,
Mm.
and you always use it for the hot food, and
Yeah.
then the other one that's for the cold stuff. And as a caterer of 40 years, I cannot tell you how many wedding receptions I did in the middle of a field with nothing.
Yeah.
So we had plenty in our
Yep.
warehouse of the cooler that said hot on the front, that, we used the cookie cooling racks to put the different pans that were going to go in the chafing dishes with the hot food. And then we put those racks in between, and we could stack stuff up in those things like crazy. And this is long before the ones that you could buy from a restaurant supply that were really thick. I mean, and I hate to tell you that the other ones work just as well. There were the ones that they're not going to last as long, and that's why
Hmm.
I suggest labeling them. If you're going to have something shut up that's hot in a cooler for a while, eventually the inside of that cooler is going to start to warp and crack. That to me is a great way to have the magic happen, that you're pulling things out and they're still hot.
It takes a big part of that stress away. And it's just one of those
Hmm.
things people have to think about in advance. And it's so funny, I closed my company during COVID, but those field weddings, people think because it's like a family friend, they've got, they have it available, they'll save all this money. I'm here to tell you, no, you will not, because
No,
there's
you will
nothing there.
not.
We had to bring every
Mm-mm.
single thing into that field. That was just I just had a flashback when you mentioned that. But, you were talking about setting things up. And so I guess one of the questions, again, for folks who may be new to this or who are looking to simplify it, they feel stressed out every weekend when they're doing it. If you are unloading your car, like, do you have a go-to? Because I think having been in this business, you probably maybe don't even think about it anymore, but sort of what's your process for what you're unloading first and last? That probably sounds like a
Well,
strange question, but I think it will
yeah,
save people
well,
time.
and it's certainly not. And I will tell you that my career has been defined by majoring in education because you were required to turn in a lesson plan to your
Mm.
principal on Friday before you left school for the following week. And maybe every school didn't do that, but my first 2 years of teaching, I had a principal that's level of expectation was at the ceiling. And I learned how to do this. I learned how to think in advance of things throughout the week instead of writing that outline from scratch on Friday with no knowledge. And so even today, my husband and I both enjoy the coast and both love to fish. There's got to be a checklist. I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna get to where you're going and you forgot the net. You forgot the knife or the electric knife that you use to clean the fish when it's all said and done. So having that list that you continue to monitor and tweak and get it just right, but you can't do anything really until you can get your table set up. So your vehicle, if it's one that you could load and have things like the coolers that have handles that you can just lift out and sit on the ground, and then under those are the tables, and they can go up pretty quickly. I also feel like totes, if it things that don't have to be in a cooler, if you can manage to put like all of your utensils and your lighters and your sterno and things like that in a tote, then it packs better. It gets out and gets on the ground, and you're not fumbling around looking for things. And you can also see through it and you can label these things. Those stack very easily back in the garage when you get home, so that you're just picking that up and putting it in the car. But I do think those lists are extremely important. We used to, when I was still doing 3 weddings a weekend, the list was prepared by the things that went with your hot presentation and the things that went with your cold presentation, things like extension cords and saran wrap and aluminum foil, paper towels, wipes, things like that were just on a utility list. But every bit of that could go in one of those totes and you weren't having to think about doing it. I know for sure that because we managed those totes so well, we saved a lot of money. When you forget things and you don't think through and it's just on a shelf in the garage and you forgot to grab it, then you're buying it again. And
Hmm.
so if you manage your containers and what goes in those containers, you look amazing to the people that come to your tailgate. They just think you're the most organized person, on earth, but it's not magic. I think it just matters if you want to do it right or if you just want to fly by the seat of your pants. I'm kind of one of those, let's do it right kind of people. And it also does make I'm kind of throwing in hospitality here for just a minute. But even when you're having people over to watch it at your own house on TV on a Monday night or a Sunday afternoon, if you are completely out of touch with what's happening, your guests feel like they have to come in there and ask what they can do to help. That's all well and good, But wouldn't it be nice if you were completely together? You had planned what you were going to do so that you were only in the kitchen for those last 30 minutes before everything goes on the table and not the whole time. I just think people enjoy themselves a lot more if the host or hostess is part of the event.
I agree. And obviously, I mean, as someone who loves a list, that should come as no surprise that I'm in complete agreement with you. But I do, I mean, people can also sense that's if going back to experience, their experience changes when you aren't relaxed.
Hmm.
I mean, people feed off of your energy.
Exactly.
If you are welcoming them and you have a drink in your hand and you're inviting them to grab a bite and you've got the game, it's ready on the TV and people are
Hmm.
instantly coming in and they're feeding off that energy versus you're running around the kitchen, you're yelling to so and so to get someone a drink. I mean, it's just a completely different feel. So yeah,
Right.
that's great advice. Now, of course, it's fall. So are there any recipes, and we'll talk a little while about your cookbooks, but are there any recipes you like would encourage people or direct people to that work for game day, but even recipes that, because we're in fall, it feels silly not to ask if you have any favorite seasonal recipes as well.
Right. My favorite thing, in fact, we just did a show with this, just like I mentioned, boutique potato chips are all the rage right now. Sliders are just companies that never, that made hamburger buns only are now making slider buns. And why is that? Because everybody's enthralled with the idea of what can be between two pieces of bread that are small enough for like 3 bites, and you call it a slider. So we did a whole show recently on different sliders and the different meats and this sort of thing. So needless to say, those hold up really well in that cooler that you're going to buy and write hot on the front of it, that you've wrapped it in aluminum foil. And whether they're piping hot or still warm or even at room temperature, every one of the ones that we did on this show work at any of those temperatures. They're just perfect. And certainly in the fall, it's colder. You just want something warm in your hand to eat. We do soup a lot. We think that is a great thing. If you're going to do the sliders, people love soup. And,
Hmm.
if it's a chowder or, I'm right now talking to you from my home in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so anything that has to do with crab or shrimp or flounder and corn and potatoes that's in a soup, so many vessels now with paper products that you can put lids on all of those. You can go ahead and dip it up, put that lid on it, sit it down in the cooler, and it's just a matter of taking it out and taking the lid off, and then you've got a slider. So I love that idea. It used to be that there really wasn't much to choose from in terms of paper products, and that's completely changed. I mean, you can do all that bamboo stuff and have a great looking buffet with ferns and the bamboo plates and a great hot chowder. There are also insulated crocks that don't have to be plugged in, that operate from a battery,
Yeah.
that you could put that in and have the lid on it. I really recommend those. The buffalo dips, the Vidalia onion dips, all the dips,
Yep.
that everybody loves, just hold up really well in a cooler, and you put it out a little bit at a time. This is another thing that I would like to point out is that people think that you've got to put it out with the amount that the 20 people that you invited are going to eat. And don't do that. Put out enough for 6 people because they're only taking a little bit at a time. And then when it gets low, you've got something that's not going to look like it was reheated 10 times when you replenish your dish. So let the bulk of it be whatever the dipping food is, whether it's a cracker or a toast point. Make the big be that and have the bowl that the dip is in, only hold like 2 or 3 cups of whatever it is. And then just, then you've got the backup in the cooler and it's still warm. So I definitely recommend that. And I'm a big dessert person.
Oh, same.
Um, you know,
The
I,
weakness.
I mean, honestly, we'll do like a cocktail party and I'll be looking over the menus that we've decided to use, and then I'll say, well, where's the dessert? Well, it's a cocktail party. Nobody's going to eat dessert. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. So if it's a bite-sized something, people really love that last little bite of something sweet. So one of the things that we're most noted for is the introduction of all these different bars that you'll see in both of my cookbooks. And the half pan that you can buy at Costco or Sam's that has a like a little bit less than an inch edge on it. We did every recipe in both books based on that pan. So when you make the recipe, you might not need but half of that pan for this weekend's tailgate. But then you're putting the rest of it already cut in the right size in the freezer, and you don't have to do that again.
That's great.
So when you're talking about something where you're just doing layers and you're baking it for a little bit of time, I certainly encourage making more than you need because the freezer is your friend. I was in the mail order business for 25 years, which started as a diversification to my catering.
Hmm.
If it was a month of the year where it was 100 degrees, people they were not picking that month for the wedding. So
Yeah.
what was I doing to make money if there were no parties, no weddings? And so I thought, well, some of my baked goods could probably make it through the mail. And the next thing you know, we're sold in Costco and HSN and Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's, with my made from scratch desserts. And so having the freezer is the way that were able to do that. I mean, the cake that left Augusta to go to New York or Philadelphia, where you are,
Yep.
was frozen when it left my building. And by the time you got it, it was perfect, ready to go, ready to eat. But it also had the instructions in case, for example, that shipped to you in the dead of winter, that cake was still frozen when you got it. We told you on a little card, what to do. Either put it back in the freezer where it would last for 6 months, or how to toast it in a cast iron skillet with a little bit of butter and put a scoop of ice cream on top. I don't recommend ice cream for a tailgate, but I certainly recommend one of those sleeves of whipped cream if you have like brownies and stuff that you can put a little dollop of that on top. But definitely dessert is one of the easiest things to prepare for a tailgate.
See, I knew my stomach would start growling. Ice cream and dessert gets me a lot of the time too, thinking about kids.
Hmm.
And I know that you are a grandmother of how many?
10.
10. So you are well versed. And
I'm well
I mean, you
versed.
are well versed in hosting with children. Sometimes they can be a little picky, probably not with tailgate food, because I feel like
Hmm.
tailgate food is generally very
Yeah, chicken
approachable.
tenders.
I mean, it's approachable. Do you have anything that you recommend people do a little differently or test out?
My children all know I love to also introduce part of the manners and etiquette into any of these sorts of experiences. So, if you're going to suggest for dessert something that has a bunch of layers and the minute you bite into it, it's going to crumble everywhere, then why in the world are you going to hand that to a 4-year-old in your den?
Yeah,
You're not.
that's the
So
grown-ups
again, you've got to
problem.
think through what is appropriate because if it's a sugar cookie and it's got that really nice icing on the top, pretty much you can bite that and you're okay. And even if some of that does crumble, that's easy with the dustbuster to get that up. But I just think that having something outside, like right now, if we decide to watch the game this weekend outside, it's still warm where I live. A popsicle's going to melt, the ice cream's going to melt. So coming up with having like the idea of the whipped cream, and even if you do it yourself or buy a big old tub of Cool Whip, you can tint those whipped creams your team colors. And then you can put it in a small Ziploc bag and cut a tiny piece off of the corner and let each kid do their own little decoration on top of that cookie. And for the most part, they're going to take their finger and lick that off before they ever even bite it. That's where I start getting a little hyperventilated is when I start seeing this mess get created. When if you had thought through the menu a little bit better, you wouldn't have that. Things like cake pops. A cake pop can be stuck onto a cone and they can go pick their cake pop, instead of it
Uh,
just laying on a platter.
yeah.
That can become a thing. We're getting closer to Halloween. The foam thing could look like a ghost
Mm-hmm.
and you could have the cake pops over it, and by the time all of them were gone you could actually see the ghost face and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, and the end of the cake pop is wrapped up in saran wrap. That's a fun dessert that's not messy, especially for outside. I would steer away from something that's frozen or is going to melt. They can have that on vacation down at the ice cream store on the corner in the town where they go.
I love that. And what a fun idea because of course too, I am just all about every holiday really, but Christmas, I mean, the cake pot, you could do a little tree. That's such a fun
Yes.
idea. Totally
Yes.
separate from tailgating, but well, if you're depending where you are, I mean, if we're making it to Christmas, we're in good shape.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Absolutely.
cake pop tree is
Absolutely.
is good. Yeah, I love that. Now, we also were talking about setup earlier. I know it ranges in formality, depending on where you are. But do you add any little, we were talking about presentation. So any little decorative touches that you like to put out, depending on whether it's a little more casual, you want to zhuzh it up a little bit.
Hmm.
Do you
Hmm.
have any go-tos that you reach for?
Well, I mentioned earlier about covering up like the blue hard frozen bottle that you
Yeah.
put the potato salad on using cabbage leaves. We use cabbage leaves a lot. We use turnip collards, to cover up trays. It just if you're doing sliders and you just put them on a tray, it's not as the wow factor as much as if you did like collard leaves. If I'm doing a tray of deviled eggs, for example, I'll put down some either red leaf lettuce or something like that. And then I'll do alfalfa sprouts and I'll sit the eggs and they look like they're in a nest.
That's so fun.
And I love that presentation. And again, you could put some of those thinner gel pack, packs under the lettuce so that your eggs stay cool while they're sitting on that tray. I have a variety of silk magnolia leaves, pine needles, pine cones, things like that for fall, antlers, feathers. They just go back in my tote and I use them year after year after year. And if you buy good silk or good artificial, it lasts forever and people can't tell it's fake. My magnolia leaves, literally, even when you touch them, you don't know they're not real. I tend to be a little bit more on the masculine side when it comes to decor. And we're not hunters, but I love to use antlers, and feathers in my decor for that sort of thing. I would be more inclined to use something that looked realistic as opposed to a lot of just like plastic pom-poms and plastic things that represent the look of the team. I like to pull in more seasonal. If it's a fall football game, just make the table look like fall. Have some pumpkins, have some bittersweet vines with the little berries. If you're getting into the holidays, it's football, but it could be holly. It could be whatever, you have in your yard that's available that kind of blends in with the time of year.
I think you can never go wrong with a very natural setting. It's kind of a crowd pleaser, but also on the crowd pleaser note, ping-ponging around here, but going back to food for a moment, we were talking briefly about just throwing in a little surprise element. I think sometimes when people hear that, they get a little nervous because we're not necessarily talking about doing some big, ostentatious, over the top element. This isn't, MTV's My Super Sweet 16. This is,
Hmm.
this is really just like that little element. I think sometimes it's just like that little extra dose of thoughtfulness,
Mm-hmm.
or just sometimes it's as simple as, I mean, I kind of wanted to tie this into food, but there have been times where I've gone to parties, and I think sometimes when we're, grown-ups, we forget that we can have fun too.
Mm-hmm.
And someone
Mm-hmm.
brought out Rice Krispie treats at a cocktail party, and let me tell
Oh,
you what, it was such a hit. That was the highlight of the cocktail party, was that someone brought Rice Krispie treats, and they brilliant. So I guess I wanted to know if there were any things that I think sometimes we forget or might not jump to that is a little more unusual that people just love that
well,
we
and you
serve.
probably had this happen many times as a wedding planner, but people will do the donut, the Krispy Kreme
Yeah.
donut at the end of the night, or they'll do the crystal, burger at the end of the night. Those comfort foods that we grew up with that you're not expecting to see at this fancy party. Many times when we would do like a 7 o'clock wedding, by the time people got to the reception, it's going on 7:45, 8 o'clock. They want to have a drink. They're going to eat something real quick, but then they're going to start dancing. And, the dancing's going to go on till midnight. So we would do a breakfast bar. So we would start making omelets and scrambled eggs and do that sort of thing. So if it's a night party, and certainly I need to meet your husband with this idea of getting so nervous that he can't eat anything. But if we know the Eagles are going to win and it was a late game and it's not going to get over to 11 o'clock, he would probably enjoy an omelet.
Yeah.
And that's something you can have all the condiments, already cut up, and it could be something fun. Those little small burners that you can buy, you could have that set up in the backyard and have a couple of frying pans. That would be not expensive to do and kind of a fun thing at the end of the night.
Absolutely. And it's funny. We used to always, again, being in the Philly area, it was all about the tasty cakes and the Philly pretzels here. So people would get on the bus at the end of the night and they would get their Philly pretzel and all the little snacks. But those are, I mean, people just love them. And I love the idea too, again, if you're tailgating and you are someone who has one of those, especially those griddle
Hmm.
grills, and you wanted to, maybe you don't get to really use it for breakfast foods very often because you have, you're just the games that you're tailgating don't align with that kind of a menu, but then you have
Right.
the opportunity to do something fun like a little breakfast bar or an omelet or something, whip it out for
Yeah.
that and use it that way. That's so fun. One of the big things I wanted to ask you about was, and you touched on it briefly, talking about energy and being a good host, but of course, hospitality plays into a lot of this, particularly in what you do professionally. And so, where do you think, or what do you think folks should keep in mind just to be a courteous host? What do you think are some of those elements that you value, that you think guests value?
Going back to the old fashioned, and not people really don't do this that much anymore, but when somebody does do it, it really registers from a business perspective. I've even gotten to the point where you just assume that everybody's going to reply to your email
Yeah.
and they don't. So when you have someone that is responsive, that even if they say, I can't put this together this week, but let's do it next week, or, you just got a response. But when somebody's invited to your house for tailgate, and they walk in, whether it's with a bottle of wine or they've found some really cute cocktail napkins that have Georgia Bulldog on it that you can use the next time you have a tailgate. It's the gesture. It's not how much the bottle of wine cost or that she picked those up when you could buy 2 for 1 at Target on a cocktail napkin, but it's the gesture of acknowledging that they were invited. I love that. And then I have a really hard time if I'm the guest not recognizing that I need to get up and help do something. If the table looks like it needs to be cleared off, I'm going to just do that. And I think you have to know where you are to know if that would go over well or if they would rather you not do that. That's just being aware of your environment. I think when you've done something like put a little vase next to the sink in the powder room, that just tells a guest that you were expecting them to go in there. Whether you've bought the little paper hand towels to go beside the sink, that you've made that room at least acknowledge that it's going to get used today, that you've got a big cooler with beer in it, and you've got another cooler next to it that you've frozen a bunch of mugs, and you've got the ice in there. And so instead of them just grabbing a beer, you've got a cute little sign that says, get a mug. And they open up this cooler, and here's this frosted over glass that they can pour their beer in. That's just a matter of being thoughtful, of having that one thing that you did at your party that was different from what anybody else has done. As years of catering, I could write another book on all the mishaps or the things that went south or the things that we had to figure out at the last minute. And those just make you better the next time you do something. It's like, I know that your audience is going to go prepare their checklist for their next tailgate party, because it does make a lot of sense to have a list and quit forgetting the same thing over and over again. So I do like to think of one something. My grandchildren are all probably going to say one day, Granny V never did Thanksgiving or Christmas and set the table without place cards. I mean, I do it every time. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's casual or we're all at the dining room table, there's a place card. And so does the place card look different? Did I use a different font when I wrote their name? They know that about me. And that's one of the things that they'll say. And so, what is it about entertaining, I think needs to get back into the fold of how we do things, that it's not so much whether you're serving tenderloin or a hamburger. It's how organized and managed you were to do it, and everybody had a blast
Mm-hmm.
because you had it ready and it was well done. And that's just a matter of taking the time to make that list that you and I have both agreed is important,
Mm-hmm.
and time management in being prepared for your guests to be there.
Absolutely. Let me know when that book's coming out. I'll send you my Cliff Notes.
That'd be great.
The last thing I did want to ask you was, of course, your books. So you have two. I believe we can talk about the fact that you're working on a third, or you're starting to think about your third.
That's
So
right.
what could folks, and I'll make sure in the show notes to link to these so people can take a peek at them and grab them. But what would you I mean, so talk us through what each is really all about and
Okay.
what folks could expect in each, and even what they could look forward to in this next one.
All right. So the first cookbook is called Recipes from My Table. So when you open it up, it's all of the old school recipe cards throughout my life. People handed me when I said, "Oh my goodness, I loved that casserole." Well, let me give you the recipe, and they would write it down. It had a cute little, like an antique stove or something in the corner. So that's the whole introduction to the book, is that it all started with a recipe. And that book is made up of everything that I either served in my cafe in Augusta, or I mail ordered through my mail order company or through another company that sold my products. So when I decided to close retail, and not because my television show got syndicated, I just decided that I would publish for the first time ever those recipes. So many people, for example, I sent Oprah Winfrey cakes for 10 years, twice a year. And I always got a note acknowledging that they received it, but never, we're going to write about you. And on the 10th year, they called me up and said, we're going to put your cake at the top of our O list in the May issue of O magazine. People knew that cake because they ordered it for Mother's Day every single year because it was pink, but they didn't know how to make it. And so I already had an audience of people that knew my recipe, but they had never made it. So
Right.
the success of that book has been that I already had a following of people that ordered those foods, and now they can't order them from me anymore, but they can make them themselves. And as a home ec teacher, my instructions are very clear, and the recipes are all very manageable recipes. So then the second book came out last year, and it's called Occasions. And the storyline there is it all started with polishing the silver. So that's how I knew a party was going on. If my mother started pulling things out of the cabinet to polish to go on the dining room table. And so these are the recipes that I did for weddings, for cocktail parties, for sweet 16s, during the golf tournament in Augusta. That those are those recipes. And so the other arm of my business is the fact that in 2004, my accountant said, you have got to figure out a way to make money in the summer because there are no weddings, there's, no grand openings, people aren't ordering stuff because they're all out of town. And so as a former home economics teacher, I thought, well, I could have children come in the summer and do a cooking camp. So camp will be 22 years old this coming summer,
Wow.
and it is now run by former campers. So
Oh,
it is truly the passion pit for me in terms of something I never saw evolving the way that it has. And so the third book that we have just started working on will be the children's cookbook. I don't have a name yet. That'll be a big surprise, but it will be, 22 years worth of educating children on which recipes work best for which age group. Etiquette, how to set the proper table, how to fold napkins, which piece of silverware you use for which thing and how to hold it. So it'll be more than just a cookbook. It'll basically be like you came to cooking camp.
yeah, a guide, which is wonderful. Children need this.
Yes.
Some adults that I know too. Well, this
Fun.
has been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm so excited. I will obviously keep an eye out and I will make sure, I mean, you have so many incredible things going on. I will make sure to link to all of them in the show notes. So your books, we'll make sure on your website, I see that you have an area where folks can see if they can access your television show. I know there's also quite a bit of content on YouTube. We'll put the website link in there, your social media links, your camp link, there's just so much going on. So congratulations. And especially to be able to doing it all so well for so long is just really a testament to your work ethic. But I just thank you so, so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, and I've enjoyed getting to know you as well. So thank
Oh,
you so
thanks.
much.